So when I got there on day 2, the guys were just wrapping up checking those oil lines on the bottom of the engine, and we're ready to push the airplane out. So that's where we start. As with day 1, every time anything happens, it's an opportunity to ask questions. So in this case, watching Quentin do more engine starts meant more opportunities to watch how he starts the engine, how he uses that EHT button, what temperatures he's watching, where he's got his hands. And then in this case, I'm also recording it so that I could review it later in the day should I have any questions. Once Quentin got the engine running, you can see he's got the propeller back in the feather position, so there's not as much thrust, there's not as much wind blowing on the guys. And then Jose and DJ are up underneath looking at those lines that we were just talking about, looking for the source of the leak that we had seen the day before, or confirming that they fixed it. So this is something I'd never seen before going out to Quentin's place. It's not something I'd never seen anybody else do, but there's clearly like 2 phases of running these 601s when Quentin does it. Number 1 is just, you know, the propeller feathered and turning real slowly, and that's where anytime the guys are going to approach the engine, that's how Quentin sends the airplane up. And then in the event that he needs to go to fine pitch, the guys sort of stay back and they're staying away from all that wind and all that chaos. You also notice when that happens, Quentin closes the canopy to make it a little easier on him, you know, with all that wind blowing around. So once running the propeller up to fine pitch, then he could go into beta, pull the engine back to max reverse, and see what the negative thrust was with his current settings. Again, they spent the night readjusting those settings, and so one of the big tests for this morning was to see if there was now enough beta to do the flight. Then after checking full reverse, prop back to course pitch, and then shut the engine down. As you're walking up to the airplane, you see that puddle forming underneath the scoop. That's the EPA can overflow. More on that in a second.
Because there's nothing up here, right?
No.
It's just this.
Yeah, it's just that cooler.
So here under the airplane is DJ and Heath. DJ's the high time guy at Quentin's company. Been there for something like 9 years. And Heath worked for the company back when the engine was overhauled. He no longer works for Quentin, but came back because he's sort of the local expert on the long nose.
It has a, I don't know if you see it here, it has a port for when you're flying, you know, the plenum's pressurized.
Sure.
So it will dump the excess fuel out the EPA can. But I think because we're doing so many ground runs, everything is full, and so it's back shooting the fuel out. The pressurization line, I think, is where all this fluid and things that were inside the cowling are coming from.
So the idea there is that the EPA can that you saw leaking out of the tail is leaking because it's full. The EPA can's full, the line's full, mostly because the airplane hasn't been flown. And since there's a small difference between Jet A and engine oil, it's hard to tell what's what. So while the bulk of the leak was taken care of with the loose fittings that were found the night before, there's the little bit that's left may just be Jet A, and they're trying to understand that.
So your EPA dump is...
Yeah, it's actually back there in the tail of the plane.
Okay.
So I think once you fly it, it will drain all the can out, and you know, you can do 4 or 5 starts before it starts to flow here, you know, but because there's no pressure, that whole
to push it out.
is full.
Yeah, I mean, there was
To me, and you know, I don't know anything, but it looked like there was like a consistent oil smoke thing happening.
So this is a vent pipe for the engine.
Okay.
And so it will continually breathe out of here.
So it's not super clear what they're pointing at there, but it's just a fixed aluminum line. It's like 1/2 inch diameter, and it comes out of the engine and is just sitting there open in the engine compartment. Also right there underneath where we're motioning is that thermostat. It's unusual for a Walter 601 installation, but this one has a thermostat between the oil cooler and the engine. So in the event that the temperature of the oil is low, it just recirculates back in the engine, and then otherwise it goes through an oil cooler. Because of that, there's a lot more oil lines on the bottom of the engine, and that was where the loose lines were found that were causing the slight puddling in the bottom of the cowling after the engine runs on day one.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times we put it in the exhaust, and then it just, whatever mists out of there,
You never see it.
burns out. DJ,
Yes.
that linkage for the beta, I want to go about 1 turn longer on that.
1 turn longer?
Yeah.
You got it.
So there were 2 reasons for the engine run. First was the oil leak, and second was the full reverse check. Here's Quentin describing the fix for that. So you're adding another turn.
Yeah, because I adjusted it up all the way.
Right.
Now think what it is, it's moving so much that the prop isn't coming up high enough. So now we're going to increase the prop RPM. So
Are there
that's
2
what-
sides to the prop RPM? There's a forward side and a back side.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing now, the back side. The forward one is easy. There's a little set screw, so you
Done.
adjust that and it's done. For the beta, you have to go through a sequence of different things.
And it just allows it to rev more on the opposite side.
Yeah, because I went into full reverse, and it only came to about 1450 on the RPM.
Right, that's what I said yesterday.
And you know, I could let off the brakes and it didn't do anything, so I'm hoping by upping the RPM it's going to make it a little bit finer and maybe give
That's
us a
huge.
little
I'll
bit
take
more.
all you can give me.
Yeah. Now that's why I'm going to figure, well, I'm in it and I've got to run. I would like the oil temperature to get up to operating limits, so that's why if I have to do a few stops or something, I figure it'd be okay.
So power control on the 601 is controlled via cables connected to the cockpit directly. There is no digital control. There is no electric servo between you and the hydraulic stuff that's actually running the motor. As a result, there's a bunch of cables and cams and stuff that make the whole system work. And those really center around 2 basic areas. First is the engine controls rear module on the back of the engine, and then the engine controls front module on the front of the engine. The back control controls the actual fuel delivery into the engine, and the front control controls the propeller pitch angle, and they're connected via a cable, which the Czechs refer to as a rope conduit. That rope conduit that goes over the top of the engine is what we're talking about right now, as that controls how the front propeller blade angle changes with beta and then reverse thrust.
All right, good to go.
I think so.
So another engine start means another chance to watch Quentin start the engine and look at how he uses that EHT button, where he puts his hands, etc. Made no difference?
No, so I think what's happening, it just doesn't have enough grunt behind it for the prop to come in. So we're going to have to adjust the whole linkage, everything by the fuel control. What to do is that other linkage there by the throttle, we need to, I guess,
Already bottomed out.
it is, the one that goes to the throttle itself.
Yeah. Of course, actually, it needs to be longer, doesn't it? Actually, let's
Yeah.
think about this.
So
Or
I would
no,
make it.
Hold on. You bring it in. Move it towards reverse a little bit. If you
Okay,
can.
so that's the opposite way. That's forward,
Mhm.
and then that would be reverse.
Yeah, so the linkage would need to be shortened, and the linkage is already bottomed out.
Because it's. I
What
think
about
what's
this front
happening.
one?
I'm pulling it back, and nothing happens. So I'm wasting a little bit of throttle.
The front one's got some adjustment. Yeah, we can tighten the front one maybe.
Yeah, we just
Or it
lengthened
needs
that,
to
which
go-
is supposed to up the RPM. Yeah, I think let's try that, and then I'll do another run.
It had 3/16 of an inch gap.
Yeah.
We're going to go into this in more detail here in a second, but here you can see DJ removing the cotter pins for that forward double lever that sends that signal from the rear engine control unit to the forward engine control unit. More in a second. So I know we already talked about this, but these are the oil lines on the thermostat. You can see Jose is tightening those up. Found one of them was loose. So again, just a lot more oil lines in the bottom of the airplane. More oil lines means more chances for a line to, once it gets warm, turn out it could use a little bit more torque.
It seemed like it was leaking there, any?
Oh, you see how I had that one here?
Oh yeah, it was in there.
See something?
Looked like it was dripping just a little bit on this one. Wasn't like down the pipe, but the pipe was wet, you know, fitting.
Was it maybe a quarter turn?
Yeah.
Ooh, look at that.
The oil temp came up to about 50 degrees now.
Too tight. Did you guys mess with that earlier today?
Which one?
The
These?
fittings.
Nah, we checked all the other ones. I didn't check these.
You said that's the thermocouple?
Yeah, that's a Vernitherm or something.
Oh, sorry, Vernitherm.
Yeah.
And you say there's a set temperature that could be published on it somewhere?
It's possible. I don't see anything on it. I don't know if this one is adjustable or not. It doesn't appear to be, so I would assume it's a set temperature. I mean, I can see it goes in half, so maybe there's a spring inside or
Sure.
something. I'm not. It's not standard.
Go ahead and
Um,
cycle it
for-
across, man.
Like Lancers and things. It's something that somebody has thought is beneficial for this aircraft. So I'm not
a little better. I
familiar
did
with
one
it 'cause it's
turn
not
and-
something we don't have on the other ones.
So on the other ones, you just run all the oil through the cooler all the time.
Yeah, it's just
Nah, I would say-
So that
well,
would
it's-
make you assume that at one point this thing was overcooling.
It's where it is
I'm assuming,
just
yeah.
about resting on it.
Because I mean, I know you know, but right before all the air that went into the motor came through the cooler, which would have been a lot of cooling.
Yeah.
And now we've sort of switched, where I assume now we're probably a little light on cooler.
Yeah, it'd be a little less.
So maybe that's long term, taking that out, and just
Possibly.
run everything through the
Yeah,
cooler.
without testing it.
Yeah, until we fly, we
Yeah,
don't know
I
anything.
don't know yet. Personally, I mean, I don't know about this particular setup without
Yeah.
testing. I would say without, just because the complexity of additional lines, fittings. Simpler the better.
Of course.
For just me personally.
Yeah. I'm right there with you.
There was one Mustang that we knew that it was built in Spruce Creek, and it had the oil cooler down there, but the lines and everything was so long that it never got hot enough.
So in that interest of trying to show as much is going on as possible, here's just some general footage of the guys as they're working through this beta rigging thing. Again, this is pretty raw, so I hope you guys bear with me that I'm not explaining all the details, but I think it's a great example of a group of smart guys trying to solve a tough problem, all going back to the compromises of the Thunder Mustang installation of the Walter and that difficult little throttle that has to fit in that tight little cockpit.
So now the RPM was only 1200 from 1500 before, so I think because it moved, well, the front shouldn't have changed. It's just it starts pulling the prop in sooner, so I think that's almost made it a little bit worse.
Alright. So you just can't get enough RPM out of reverse.
Yeah, 65 was the highest it came. I mean, it's just barely above idle.
Yeah, barely.
You need it back?
Yeah.
Alright.
There's nothing we can do up front to change the mechanical advantage, is there, on the throttle?
Well, I was wondering if we shorten the linkage throw.
Make it a little bit lower?
Yeah. I don't know how. I don't know
It's going
how.
to make the throttle a lot harder, but
That's what I was
it's
wondering.
going to give it a lot more
How
movement.
hard and how sensitive is it right now? Somebody discovered it didn't have enough throw already,
Okay,
so it's been dropped down one.
got it.
So they're going to go an additional and see what happens, and how it feels and how it operates.
And it just gives you more authority.
It would be more resistance on the throttle
Of course,
quadrant, but yeah, it would give you more
You
travel
pulling that
on
little
the
bracket
throttle.
off?
What's that?
You're more likely to over rev on takeoff too, or overpower.
Yeah,
over
that's
temp.
why that throttle quadrant seems like I just felt the one in the back seat, it felt like it had a good amount of travel, so
Right.
I haven't ran it, so I don't know how sensitive it is.
Right.
Both of you would know more of that. I don't know how sensitive this one is.
So what Heath is talking about here is, again, ties back to the limitations of that narrow little throttle in the Thunder Mustang cockpit. So basically you have 3 points to work with. You have the full throttle, you have full reverse, and then you have the beta lock in the middle. And the trick is to be able to get beta to give you enough reverse, and that's all limited by how much force that throttle quadrant is capable of generating. So since that's an issue, you make the beta, you make it take less deflection for the beta to come up to full reverse. And then the issue is that now it also takes less deflection to go to full power. And so what happens is on takeoff, when you're adding power to go, there's more of a tendency to over-temp the engine as you wait for it to accelerate as you add power. Again, this is not a digitally controlled engine. So if a pilot just grabs that black knob and slams it all the way up to full power, it's going to dump a bunch of gas into the engine and it's going to over-temp the motor. So that power addition for takeoff has to be gradual, and in order to keep the engine from over-temping, and in order to get that beta stop, that full reverse stop, to work properly, you make that effect worse. So it's all this balancing act between how much brake power you have, how much full reverse you need, and then how much PIO tendency the pilot's willing to put up with on the takeoff go.
Well, the one plus about doing all those beta adjustments, we're trying to confirm if there's any more oil leaks, and so far it looks okay. Haven't gotten any more splashes. Or
I
anything.
really appreciate the extra effort.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So after we drilled that hole part way down in the power lever, we didn't even have to run the engine. You could tell just by moving the throttle that it was going to be way too sensitive.
It's not a lot of travel.
It's not.
No.
Not
That-
gonna work.
That took about a good 40% of the travel away.
Yeah.
So they're idle. Full power. Yeah. No.
Alright.
That,
So we moved that rod end back to the position it was in before.
I wonder if we don't shorten that the turn again, put it back to where it
I
was,
did see y'all moved it all the way up on the slide
Yeah.
too from yesterday.
which gives it a little bit more. Actually, I think instead of shortening it, move it down about 1/4 of where it is.
Okay. Center.
Yeah, I just want to see if playing with the different angles and lengths might change something.
Running it.
Yeah, so I'll have a look when I run it now, because I mean,
Okay.
it's just barely, it's about a 16th
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, because everything up here operate at one time just so I can see it. Yeah, everything's fine up here. There's still travel.
Yeah. prop came up to about 1560 to 1600.
Okay.
It's still not enough to go like reverse,
Yeah.
but it's definitely a lot.
At least they would have managed some tops. Okay.
I don't think I'll be able to do much more than that. So what I did is I turned the idle up, so our starting ground is
Sure.
a higher position.
Sure.
But I don't really want to go much more than that on the idle, otherwise when you come into land you're just going to float and then you're in another issue. So by doing the idle, it upped the RPM about 10 on the prop for regular idle speed.
So, prop idles up or N1 idles up?
So N1 idle is up about 1.5%,
Okay.
and then that only brought the prop RPM up by about 10. So
Okay.
it went from 900 to about 910.
There's a limitation in the book about beta in flight.
Yeah.
Can I use beta to shorten the approach?
In this airplane, I wouldn't.
Because,
You lose airflow over the rudder, well, over the whole tail.
but from an engine perspective,
The engine perspective, yeah, the engine doesn't really know.
I would rather take the risk of losing flow over the tail than pull the condition knob and flame the thing out and try to get it down in the event I can't get it down.
Yeah, I mean, but even in my plane, my prop RPM is higher. I sit at about 1200 at idle, and I cannot get mine down any lower than that.
Huh.
But yeah, I mean, worst case is, I mean, you could barely touch it
Yeah,
to where
yeah.
it's in between beta and
Sure.
regular. But it'll definitely make your elevator go.
Of course, yeah. The rule of thumb I used to use was I didn't go into beta until the tail wheel was on the ground.
Yeah, I would say
For
as
that
soon as
reason.
your mains touch the ground, you could go. I mean, if you had to stop quickly.
Right. That's the magic. Thank you.
Pull her back in.
I think so. We'll double check for leaks and all that, and then get it cleaned up. Yeah, the window stayed clean.
So it's pretty aggressive to be trying to describe how the beta system works in a video like this. But just to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward because it is so complicated, here's Quentin describing from his perspective what we were trying to do there.
Hey Elliot, I figure what better way to explain what we adjusted on the beta than on an airplane. So to start, we had tried to adjust this one.
The tie rod slider for the propeller governor actuating lever.
Move it up and down to change the mechanical advantage. The higher up you go, the more movement you get on the propeller governor. So we tried that, were relatively unsuccessful. So then we went back onto where the throttle quadrant actually attaches to there.
So according to the manual, that's the reversed thrust lever tie rod on the engine control lever.
So we've got this aluminum bracket on my aircraft. So what we did is we had made a new hole about 1/8 inch lower, and it gave a little bit better mechanical advantage, but it made the throttle way too sensitive. So we had to put it back and just adjust the beta the best we could.
Wing in the clear, yep.
Good on this side, got plenty of space.